great to have a little bit of an audience. I just thought it was going to be myself, Ethan and Steve, but it's great to have everybody here. And Sharon. One of these laser things, you know.
You might as well just be in summer in the pool the whole time.
That's the idea. So what I wanted to talk about this morning was what I call excellence in leadership, the care factor. As many of you know, my name's Steve Simmons, also known as the Persuader. I'm a business coach here. I've been in business for 13 years, which basically puts me in the top 4% of businesses for longevity, believe it or not. So if you've been in business for over 13 years plus, you're in that 4%. And there's a lot of different reasons for why people aren't in that 4%, and some of those we'll probably discuss this morning. Okay, so what I wanted to take you through this morning is the current decline of corporations, because it actually has an impact on all of us that's in this room. What elements make up an excellent company, give you a bit of an idea about that. Understanding your employees, because human resources are a huge part of excellent company success. Why would somebody want to work for you? So we'll go through a little bit of that as well. Then we'll talk about the care factor, and then just some ideas about how you can get it right. So the current decline of corporations. That's been happening since essentially the mid-80s. And basically one of the reasons for that is because a lot of those particular corporations who were extremely successful in the 60s, 70s and 80s were sales organisations. They were sales focused, and then they started slowly but surely being taken over by people who are usually accountants, CFOs, financial controllers, human resources, procurement, people who've got no interpersonal skills. So this doesn't David's one of the nicest accountants in Bathurst, all right? And we're talking about big corporations here, not public accounting firms. And what slowly started changing was a lot of these organisations were putting profit over people because they had the wrong people in these leadership roles. Sales is not a dirty word, and what they were trying to do was essentially suppress the sales focus within all these organisations. So, for example, if a sales rep was starting to make more money in commissions than a general manager, they'd start putting pressure on them and then eventually get rid of them, even though that sales rep might have been bringing millions of dollars into the organisation. Okay? And he was being paid on what they agreed. But those sort of things started happening more and more because they had the wrong people in the wrong positions.
That sounds like ego.
Oh, yes. That's part of it.
That's a Skype song, isn't it? That's a dirty word.
Are you going to sing it? The other thing was disengaged staff, and we'll go through some figures very shortly about that as well. But what was starting to happen was they were losing the vision of what a lot of these sales leaders were pushing, and slowly but surely staff are becoming disengaged. And one of the perfect examples was as a new CFO comes into a particular corporation, they want to stamp their mark, and part of the way they look at that is by cutting costs. So one of the costs they did in this particular organisation in the first few weeks that they'd been there was they used to provide fruit to the staff in the canteen essentially every week, so on a Friday, and they decided to cut that out. Now, it was costing the organisation around about $5,000 a year. So to save that $5,000, that's what they did. However, they lost a lot of staff over that. A lot of them become disengaged because they could see what was happening. And that was just one thing. One thing. The indirect cost of that decision cost them thousands, absolute thousands, by making that decision. So even though, say, $5,000 in the short term, he's lost the company a lot of money and lost the company a lot of skills because a lot of these disengaged people started to see what was happening and moved to other organisations. So. As I mentioned before, a lot of these people that were getting promoted into these leadership positions were very good technical specialists, very good, but they had no people skills. They didn't understand how important the relationships were between staff, between customers, between suppliers and other stakeholders, and also the community. They started looking at everything as transactions. So, for example, if they were dealing with some of their suppliers who are very important in their success, they would start negotiating and cutting what they would want to pay. These are large corporations, so they have the power to do that. But what it was doing was eroding the relationship they had with those suppliers. So as a supplier, if I'm getting screwed by one of my customers, what am I going to do? I'm going to look...
Find another one.
Exactly.
Find another.
And that's what's starting to happen. And of course, what happened was, when some of the suppliers are very specialist, and they lose that particular customer and they go somewhere else to find a good customer they can deal with, that then impacts on the supply chain, that then impacts on them being able to provide products and services for their customers. So that's why I've done that before. I usually spill coffee on people as well. That's why Jared always stays well away from me. The other thing they did was they were continually looking at, and in the words of continuous improvement, looking at ways to cut costs within the organisation constantly. Okay. Now, sometimes there's reasons for that, and you do have to cut costs, I understand that. But to do it just as a matter of course, to make yourself look good, ego, again, it doesn't work. And you impact on so many relationships that you end up destroying the company. And that's exactly what's happened to a lot of large organisations over that period of time. The other thing is no investment in training. So one of the cost-cutting things that they came out about was, let's cut our marketing. We'll get rid of some of our marketing people. We don't need to do that. We can outsource it. Let's cut our training, because what we're going to do is when we recruit, we're only going to hire people who've got that right experience and know what they're doing. Now, what do you think happens with that? If we're only recruiting the people that know what to do for that particular role, what else happens?
Running out of those people.
You do. And it not only impacts on that particular company, but it impacts on their whole industry. So essentially it almost wipes out their whole industry. And one in particular I can think of off the top of my head is the air conditioning industry. You try and find an air conditioning technician over 45, under 45. Very few. Okay. Because what they were looking at is, we're not going to need air conditioning maintenance. We're going to, if something breaks, we're going to replace it. But the problem is some of those air conditioning units are huge and they need to be maintained. But they've got no skills coming up through because nobody's training them. They can't afford to. And of course, no care factor. Because if those particular personalities don't understand relationships and put everything down to a dollar, a transactional value, there is no care factor. So, to be an excellent company. And at the end of this, I've got a handout that gives sort of 8 points about what makes up an excellent company. But I just want to share some of these with you. So the first thing is shared vision, mission and values. So a lot of these large organisations had one simple message. And a classic example of that is Nike. Just do it. How simple is that, right? The whole organisation believed that vision. The whole organisation trained people from the lower levels, entry level, right through to think for themselves, to be leaders, and to just do it. The other thing is having quality products and services. So a lot of these excellent companies always have the best quality in products and services. And that applies to many of us that are in this room. Strong customer focus. You heard this saying from the old days, the customer is king. Well, that is still true. But how many organisations these days treat their customers like crap? I can think of the banking industry. Sorry, Stacey. Banks, insurance companies.
Gee, Steve, she doesn't have any of these. That's not alienated. This is a credit
I'm a credit union.
He'll offend everybody equally by the end. Tomorrow's a different day.
Now I've got to say, in relation to, as a generality, how bad the banking industry is, but Stacey is a classic example of what the banking industry should be. She's out and about, she talks to her customers and she cares about them. Okay? That's what the banking industry should be doing. That's very true, isn't it, Stacey?
Stephen,
Some of you are hands.
The banks got rid of their bank managers, and we all remember when that happened, right? And then all of a sudden, it's come back at, they're now called relationship managers or whatever, but it's actually going back to that model where they are building relationships with their customers because they've realised they've lost a lot.
But they're still not making the decisions at the ground level.
No,
Into that as well.
no, very frustrating.
Because when you're a bank manager, even 30 years ago, you could go to your bank manager and say, hey, I need $5 grand. Go, Sandra's a good person, I know that she'll pay us, there's your $5 grand. You can't do that now. It's got to go up through a system, and they'll have a look at your financials and everything else. They don't care that you're a person of your word, and you can do it on a handshake, and it doesn't happen. I go, well, no, sorry, Sandra doesn't have the financials, you can't get that loan. You know, it's just ridiculous. So they've taken the human factor out of it, they've taken the care factor out of it. Innovative strategies at all levels, so really encouraging.
Nothing to do with government regulation, but that's fine.
Get over it. Same with government regulation. You take the human factor out of it, you don't care. It just comes back to a transaction. So you can work it out. It's not that hard. It's just taking a risk. Every person in this room who owns their own business takes a risk every day. And yet, when we get to things like banks and insurance companies and some government departments, they don't want to take that risk because, oh, let's go back to our rule book. Okay? Rules should be there to guide, not to punish like they do. Sorry about that. Get off your soapbox. So innovation strategies at all levels, they encourage people to think on their feet. They encourage people to listen to what their customers' needs are and get that feedback up through the organisation so that they can change with the marketplace. So ideally what they do is they stay close to their customers. They know exactly when there's a change in the marketplace and the business changes with it. Now, these major corporations such as IBM, who still do this by the way, Digital Equipment, which I had the privilege of working for, 3M, GMAC, NRMA and David Jones were in those days very good examples of Australian excellent companies. Apple, when Steve Jobs was around, I'm not 100% sure now because that seems to be declining. So those are sort of the organisations that do a lot of these things, and that's how they got to the top of where they are. But a lot of the principles that they use can be used in any organisation, whether you're a one-person band, shooter, whether you've got 20 or 30 staff. They're also constantly ahead of the competition because they're always talking to people. So for example, in the recruitment game, when you stay close to your customers, you know exactly what your competition's doing. You know exactly who's charging what and if they're being naughty. Okay, because your customer's going to tell you.
Steve, but in that sense, who's your customer? The person looking for a job or the person engaging you?
For me, the person who's engaging me, because they pay me. It's another discussion.
It is.
And we should be able to charge candidates too. But anyway.
No, we do that.
I think we might have a conflict.
That's a law thing, man. But different conversation. And developing visionary leaders. So developing leaders from the bottom up. Okay? Because those leaders that are at this lower level will be the leaders tomorrow, and they will carry the organisation forward. But if they're not allowed to do that, they're not encouraged to do that, if they're punished for making mistakes, it's not going to happen. So, talking about disengagement. So the percentage of workforce engaged at its present time is 2016, 24%. That's it. Not good, is it? Percentage of workforce not engaged, 60%. Percentage of workforce actively disengaged, 16%. So, to clarify actively disengaged, employees is not only not aligned to your business, but he or she is actively working against your business. Okay? So you need to be aware of that. And what really stunned me was only 19% of managers and executives display a high interest in their job. It's 2013. 19%. That's incredible. So we've got a long way to go to get back to those days where we had 60% of our workforce engaged and about 20% not engaged, and we still had a reasonable level of disengagement.
Yeah, sorry, the company I've just finished working with, the non-engagement aspect is not simply, it's a bit misleading, I think, to say non-engaged. What that means is they're 9 to 5 workers, they're just not going the extra mile. It's not that they're.
Well, these ones here, this disengaged,
60%.
16%.
No, that's the ones that actively, disinterested.
Oh, you mean this one here?
Yeah, the non-engagement is just, the majority are just sitting in the 9 to 5 workers.
They're doing their job.
That don't go the
It's not-
extra mile, that's, that's.
Exactly. And that's the same with if they're in customer service, if they're just doing their job, their extra mile might be that I don't smile at anybody. I don't engage with the customer, but I'm still doing my job. So, but they're not doing what these ones are doing, and they're a real problem because they're actually sabotaging your business. So if you've got people like that in there in your company, you have to get them out.
And I would imagine that they're a big influence on the non-engaged.
They are.
Big one.
Yeah. Huge.
Will it affect organisational culture? And they usually have a stronger drive on it.
Exactly. Any more questions around that? Well, I just can't get that. The figures are staggering. So, over this period of decline, essentially, you imagine your organisation as the bricks of a house. The people are the mortar, and they are extremely important to that house standing and that house being successful. Organisations start to look like this. There's a lot of corporations, this picture describes a lot of corporations these days. The issue is that it's not just 1 or 2 organisations, it's starting to impact on industries. So industries are starting to look like this. Okay. That then impacts on our whole community. So it's really important to understand the care factor and what it means in organisations. Okay. So let's get on to the positive side now. Top 6 reasons why employees want to work for you. So if you have a clear vision and mission, and it's not necessarily related to profit, I mean, we're all in business to make profit, and that's fine. But if your mission is something that states about caring about people, you're more inclined to get your staff involved with that. Your staff will buy into that. If it's just about money, they won't. And it doesn't matter how well paid they are, they will not get involved with that. You listen to them and treat them with respect. So in relation to management styles and leadership styles, you need to lead people, not dictate to them. Very, very few staff will put up with being dictated to. And if you're in a situation, and particularly in regional areas, people can't often always change jobs, so they put up with it. They're in that 16% of people that are actively sabotaging your organisation because of the way that they've been treated. Okay. That they're rewarded and recognised for good work. And being rewarded is not necessarily about money. It may be about, hey, that was a fantastic job, thanks for doing that. Or highlighting somebody that's a customer has written them a testimonial and letting other staff know about that. Okay. Have things like in the old, I don't know if many companies do it these days, but have, like employee of the month, employee of the year. Have for your sales teams things like, in those days we used to get trips to like Fiji and go to a conference and basically have a great time. But have those rewards there. But work out for each person, each individual employee, what's important to them. What's going to motivate them. Because they might not want a trip to Thailand. They might want a few days off to spend with their family. Or they might need assistance with school fees. Or they might need assistance with daycare. Those are the sort of things. You find out what each person is motivated by. You train to become better at their job and to become better people. Okay. So, without putting anybody on the spot, how many people here put money into training their staff regularly? Great. It is so important to ensure that your people not only know how to do their jobs properly, but are being trained to go to that next level. Okay? Because if you're training your staff, it then also helps your whole industry, which is why we encourage all employers within an industry to train their staff, because it then lifts the standards of that industry. And it doesn't matter whether it's the legal or real estate, banking, insurance, waste management, doesn't matter. It lifts the whole industry. You empower them to become leaders, so you encourage them to use their initiative. You encourage them to think outside the square. You encourage them, particularly around customer issues. If there is a way that they can help a customer, help them. Don't break the rules, bend them, if need be. But it's got to be customer focused. And of course, you create a fun environment to work in where failure is acceptable. So the only thing is that people know Virgin, Richard Branson. He has set up an amazing fun culture for their staff. However, one problem I have with them is they don't pay very well. So a lot of people work for them in relation to the fun environment, all that sort of thing, but the pay, particularly at entry level, is you can barely live on. Okay? So I encourage people to pay them properly as well. So create the fun environment, but make sure they can live on it. So the biggest threat to innovation is internal politics and an organisational culture which doesn't accept failure and or doesn't accept ideas from outside and or cannot change. Okay. You need innovation coming through your organisations continuously. And the best people to give you that innovation are usually those that are on the ground level dealing with the customers. So you've also got to look at whether you're a boss or a leader. And I encourage people who may be bosses at the moment to start looking at becoming leaders. And these are the differences. So drives employees, coaches employees. Depends on authority, depends on goodwill. Okay. Now it takes time to build this up. It does. So often when you need to get things done quickly, a lot of people don't necessarily rely on that, and it is difficult. It's not easy. Inspires fear, generates enthusiasm. Okay, you can see the differences. Says I, says we. Okay. So you do everything as a team, not as an individual person. Because every successful business owner I've ever spoken to has always said that they couldn't do what they did without their staff. Okay. And even people that are on their own, I couldn't do what I do without my clients. I just wouldn't survive. And also the advocates that I have as well, who support me. So they may not be staff, but without those people supporting me, I wouldn't be in business. I wouldn't have lasted 13 years. Places blame for the breakdown, fixes the breakdown. So if something happens, it's an experience, learned by it, let's get on and get it fixed. Okay? Unless it's one of those 16% trying to sabotage your company, then you get rid of them. Uses people, develops people. Okay? So a lot of people are falling into this category of using people and not developing them because they can't see the value in constantly training, continuously improving their people. Takes credit, gives credit. Now, in a number of organisations I work for and corporations, I don't know how many times credit was taken from a senior manager of work that I'd done. And then they'd been rewarded for it, and I hadn't. So it's quite soul-destroying. Commands, asks. Okay? So it's difficult to get out of that sometimes when you've been running your own business and then it grows and then you've got staff because you've been doing everything from your perspective on your own and making those decisions. And then you've got a stack of people around you. It's a lot easier to command, but you get better results if you ask. Okay? And then says go, says let's go. Okay, because you're doing it as a team. So this is the care factor. You have one message. It's centralised around loving your customer. Okay? Because without your customers, none of us exist. And in the decline that we've had in the last sort of 20 years, for whatever reason, we start to forget that. Okay? It starts with the board. It has to start at that level. The board have to care. The board have to love the customers. And then that comes through the CEO that they get on to manage the place. Then through the senior management and middle management, same thing, they all have to care. Now, if this area is caring and this area is caring, this area will always care. If they don't care here, and it's all transactional, and it's all about profit, why should these people care? Why should these people care? Doesn't happen. And that's what the care factor is about. Supervisors and experienced staff need to care about the customer, but care about the juniors. I don't know how many times I've seen where I've recruited for a junior role and we've placed somebody in there, and then the managers come back and said, "Oh, Steve, I don't know if this is going to work out." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Oh, they're not doing the job properly." I said, "You do realise they don't have any experience, right? You actually have to train them, on-the-job training." "Oh, yeah, but..." I said, "Look, if you want an experienced person, it's going to cost you another 10, 15,000. So why don't you train that person?" They've trained them up and they've been fantastic and then gone through the organisation. If you're going to put juniors on, constantly 24-hour supervision. That's what they need. They don't have experience. You can't expect them to do a job if they haven't been trained to do it. Okay. And some take a bit longer to learn than others as well. Okay. So, that's not the toilet, is it? It's not sewers, is it?
Steve, you go and tell me.
Yeah, go on.
I don't know,
Fix that truck up, will you?
Ron Finnimall's truck, delivered to Woolworths.
They got the junior to fix the brakes.
Yeah, that's right. Put the non-asbestos one on.
So even though I talked a lot about corporations today, a lot of these principles apply to small business. And to get it right, even in a very small organisation, these are the things that you can do or start working on. I would not expect everybody to start doing this tomorrow, but it's something that you can look at and plan further ahead. So the one thing that I really think is very important is getting that one message. Get your vision statement out there, very short, and then share it with everybody and get everybody on board. And in fact, the best way to do it when you're working out a new mission statement is vision statement is to get everybody on board to do it. Okay? Consult with the staff, see what their ideas are, because they're closest to the customer, and you want your vision to be about what customers need. Because if customers can then share that, they'll get the message as well and be advocates for you. So as I said, share your vision and mission. Put people before profit. If you put people before profit, you will make money. Okay? If you put profit before people, you end up like that picture with the big black hole, because that's what will happen. And there's plenty of examples about that. Seek continuous improvement. Okay? Have a look at your policies, your processes, your technology. Spend even a week, a year planning what you can improve on within the organisation within that year or 2 years or 3 years. Constantly look at what you're doing. Allow creativity and innovation at all levels. Okay? Encourage your staff to think outside the square. One of the classic examples of that is 3M. You know the post-it notes? Okay. They didn't used to have the sticky thing on. And then one of the sales reps was out talking to one of the customers, and the customer said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could just put the post-it note up on the wall there when I'm talking to the staff when I'm training?" And he went back to his boss and said, "Is there any chance we can do that?" He said, "Go and talk to the engineers." They talked to the engineers and said, "Yeah, that's easy." What happens? Post-it notes are one of their biggest sellers. They made millions of dollars out of it. Just through that idea and having the opportunity for that sales rep to come back and express what the customer needs. Okay. A lot of organisations would have just said, "Oh, don't be stupid, we haven't got time for that. Concentrate on selling this." Why are you talking about that? Okay. They discourage people.
Can I add to that? I believe that was actually a massive fail in the engineering department as well, because they were looking to get a permanent glue that they could use on
That's right.
paper, and they kept coming up with ones that wouldn't stay permanently, they just keep coming off. So they went, "Yeah, we can do that." We've got a fail here.
And a lot of their competitors had the same problem when they were trying to compete against it as well. They couldn't get the glue to stick.
About the sticky tape supplier. Yeah, we used to do it, and stick them up with sticky tape. They just transferred from their sticky tape division to their post-it note division. They all got sacked, they all got employed.
Get the innovation point there. So encourage initiative and forgive mistakes. Okay, we all make mistakes, and as long as you know that it's not, if somebody's doing something intentionally, then do something about it. But if you know that it's an honest mistake, then learn by it. Make sure everybody else does. Turn it into a case study for training. Okay, there's so many things that you can do to benefit out of those mistakes, and some of those mistakes could turn into making you money. Invest in training, not only in your staff but in yourselves as well. So look at really focusing on how you can improve your leadership skills, your management skills, your soft skills, and go and get training on them. And of course, develop leaders, because the more leaders that you develop within your organisation who believe in that mission, vision statement, the better off your company will be, and you'll have everybody behind you. Okay? So you will have maybe 80 or 90% of your staff actively engaged, and that's what you're looking at to become an excellent company. You can't please everybody all the time, so you're going to have some people that will be disengaged. But if you've got 80 or 90%, you've got a great company. And then, of course, probably the most important thing is stay close to your customers. The customers know when the market's changing. The customers know when they have new needs. And if you don't know that and you're not watching, you can lose out on great opportunities and your competitors will get in there. Now, these large organisations are like the huge oil tankers. They can be hard to move, but all of these excellent companies that are that size move very quickly like little tugboats, because they stayed close to their customers and they knew what was going to come and they could plan for it. Any questions? Really?
It's been all very interactive throughout the process, I guess, Steve.